let's go right into the next controversy, because this is something that when I was a Dave Ramsey loyalist, I got, like I said, internet wars with people. Define. Oh man, what do you say? Like your
The keyboard warriors,
yeah,
Cheeto stained keyboard warriors.
JJ would be like, I think your New York almost just came out. Like,
Oh, no, no, no. New York Brad. That's what I call
yeah, like, oh, don't make my New York come out. But
him.
all the things that I used to debate that I've changed my mindset have been because I didn't listen. That's a major problem that I have with some of those loyalists is they're not listening. And when I sat down and started to listen to intelligent people like yourself, because this is something that me and you used to argue about. You used to
Yeah.
say, Brad, there is good debt. And I used to say, JJ, you are a crazy person. So you brought it up first years ago to me. What is the difference in your opinion? We might have different definitions of it. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Everybody probably does.
What is the definition of good debt and bad debt? And is there such thing as this dreaded good debt?
So it's a great question. And I'm glad you asked me that because at the beginning of the show, I started off saying that I hate owing people money.
Mm-hmm.
But what I didn't say,
Are you going to be a hypocrite?
what I didn't say is I don't mind owing people money when that money is making me money.
Mhm.
And I think that's the quick way to give a definition on good debt. What you got to think about is consumer debt, bad debt, whatever you want to call it, is something that's costing you money every single month. So when you go buy that car, when you buy your personal home, you have a mortgage on it, whenever you have your credit card debt, your student loans, that's money that's getting taken out of your pocket every single month that you have to pay for something. That is what I would consider bad debt. Good debt is something that's making you money. So for example, I have a buy and hold rental property. I have a mortgage on that property. But I have tenants who live in that property that pay me enough money to not only one cover my mortgage, my good debt, but it also pays for all the repairs, pays for any vacancies I may have because I stock that cash away in a bank account, but it also makes me an extra 400 bones every single month. So I'm okay with having that mortgage sit there while I'm earning that extra cash every single month. Now we can get into a little bit more in depth in this episode, but I also think you can go overboard with good debt. So we'll touch on that in a little bit, but I want to know your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, the devil's advocate is, but JJ, what happens if you don't get a tenant? And it's like, well, you have an emergency fund because you're
Yep.
intelligent, or you sell the property.
Well, real quick, I want to say that whenever I have, so my wife and I are hoping to have roughly about 10 rental properties. And we, with each rental property, we want to have enough money stocked away for each property to be able to replace a roof, replace an AC, be able to pay the mortgage on that property for a year if we have no tenants, which honestly would never happen. But if it does, another COVID pops up or something like that, we want to be able to pay that off, or not to pay it off, but we want to be able to cover those payments. So
Yeah,
I'm glad
no.
you said that.
Yeah, and I think when you say having too much debt, if you've ever heard somebody else talking about this, it's referred to as being over leveraged. So, I mean, when it comes to good debt and bad debt, I'll even take it one step further. You use the definition, which I think is awesome, of saying debt that's making you money or going to make you money is probably considered a good debt. And as somebody that's owned 3 small businesses, and one of which is the brewery is a multi-million dollar business. If I wouldn't have taken on debt in any of my businesses, I wouldn't have had a business. And what I did was do the math. What's the return on investment? How fast am I going to be able to pay that off? The same thing when I opened my CrossFit gym. Well, I walked into an empty warehouse. I put about $25,000-$30,000 worth of equipment in that gym. And I said to myself, well, if I have this amount of members over this amount of time, all that's going to pay itself off quickly. I'm going to pay some interest, but after it's paid off, that interest is going to pay itself back 100 times over. The brewery, we exploded so fast, and in the brewery industry, things are expensive, but the margins are also very, very awesome. So it's like right now in the brewery, there's probably $500,000 worth of stainless steel in that place between the piping and the tanks and stuff. And yes, I could have saved up money and bought another fermenter, saved up money, bought another fermenter. But during that time, if I would have leveraged some debt and bought all my equipment all at once, which would have got me a better deal, and had it all there, I could keep up with the accelerated growth of that business. So I think business is a one, like right now, this podcast is in debt.
Yeah.
You bought microphones, headphones, webcam. We're in debt right now to this, but we see the potential of one day possibly making money. Granted, yes, it's a labor of love. If it makes a couple of bucks, great. But you can't go into it thinking I'm going to cash flow everything, because it might hold back your business. And as far as the mortgage, like I consider my personal residence a good debt. Now, it's a very fine line, and I'll get stricken down for that. But
I'm interested. So I disagree with you on that.
Okay, so here,
And this is a perfect AJ versus Brad podcast moment. This is our first disagreement, so I'm excited for this. Let's go.
Okay, and I'm curious to hear your point. So, Dave Ramsey says you should have a 15-year fixed rate mortgage and you should be able to put 20% down your house. All right. So I did those things. I have a 15-year mortgage, which right now has 12 years left on it. I actually put 30% down on my house, all in cash. And in the recent times, I was able to refinance my mortgage for 3%. I know pretty confidently that I can get a return on my investment elsewhere that exceeds my mortgage. So when I look at both on paper, and I know you're trying to pay off your mortgage right now, and I also know that you're paying off your mortgage because it's going to give you some stability as far as your expenses are concerned,
Right.
and it's also going to give you peace of mind. I don't need the peace of mind of not having the mortgage at 3%, and I don't really need to free up that money with my current financial situation and my job security. And I think I'm at a position where if you have that money in the bank, I have the money, I could pay off my mortgage. I have it in cash. So when I say that I think my primary residence is good debt, I have to put the asterisk on it that I have the money to pay it off if I needed to. If whatever reason they close my school tomorrow in these times, it could happen. I could pay off my mortgage tomorrow.
I see what route you're going with this, and I agree with you on here.
So I'm holding cash to protect myself if I do lose my job, because I want to be able to live. I got to feed my kids. I got to pay my bills. And putting all that money and paying off my mortgage and then losing my job the next week would put me in a pretty big hole, because you can only the value of your home is only worth what you can sell for.
Right.
So let's just say I have $200,000 in the bank. I lose my job tomorrow. I have $200,000.
Yeah, you can live on that for a long time.
I pay off my mortgage tomorrow. I have no money. I lose my job. What situation is better for me? That's why I consider it good debt. So that's kind of where I'm at with the primary residence thing. I think if your interest rate is low enough, then maybe we'll put a little less than 4%. Three is a great interest rate because I have good credit. We'll get to credit. So many things we could freaking talk about.
Man, we got a bunch of long list of things to talk about.
So tell me why you disagree.
Yeah. So, and you make a good point. I totally understand where you're coming from. You're kind of thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're kind of thinking as you're using that leverage on your mortgage to keep that cash in your bank account for like a safety thing. And that's kind of why that's good debt is there, because you get to keep that cash there. I get that.
It's almost like a home equity line of credit.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
And you're just funding it yourself. You don't have to pay somebody to do that.
Right.
So here's my thought on that. I personally still think that would be considered bad debt because your personal residence isn't bringing you any income in. So yeah, you may have the cash sitting in your bank. You have the cash sitting there that you could pay off the mortgage, you could live off of if you lose your job, but it's still, so let's say you lose your job, right? You still have to make a mortgage payment. You still have to fix your AC unit if it goes out. You still have to replace your roof if something happens with that. So that 2,000, let's just say it's 200,000 you have in the bank. If you have that 200K in the bank, you lose your job, some of that 200K is going to get ate up from your mortgage, your good debt. So I would look at that as that being bad debt because that's money coming out of the accounts if you would happen to lose your job. Now let's turn it around. Let's say your primary residence, for those of you that listened to last week's episode, Bryce, he started off house hacking. Let's say you had somebody living in your house with you that was renting a room, then I could see that being good debt because you're making an income from that property. So that's kind of my, I guess, thought process. And I'm excited for these down the road, these Brad and JJ,
Well,
difference of opinions. Go ahead, let's go.
let me play devil's advocate
Yeah, yeah,
back.
yeah.
So I said this is like a HELOC. I also have a
Mhm.
HELOC on my property,
Okay.
and I use that HELOC to make me money.
Okay.
So a large percentage of the money that I have tied up in the flips with John Scholler right now is part of a HELOC at a super, super low interest rate. It's cutting into what he's paying me, which is still returning me more than the average of the stock market. So if I'm using the value of my house for a HELOC, that's a little bit different, right?
Yeah, I would say
Is
it is.
my
Yeah.
all right? So is the HELOC good debt?
Good debt. Yeah, if it's making you income, I would say it is. Like if someone would take a HELOC out to go buy a rental property, I would say that's good debt.
So your only criteria for good debt is it needs to be making you money.
Yes.